Start again. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Licensing and Safety Committee this morning. It's been webcast, so people can watch it who are not in the meeting with us today. We'll start with a round of introductions. My name's Amanda Pinnock. I'm the chair of the Licensing and Safety Committee. I will turn to my right. Just introduce yourself.
My name is Jenny. I'm the governance officer.
Left.
Tahir Hanif, Senior Legal Officer.
Councillor Sokal, should we start with you?
Yeah, Councillor Mohan Sokal, Greenhead Ward Councillor, Labour Councillor. Yeah. Thank you.
Councillor Moses Crook, Labour Councillor for Home Valley South.
Councillor Karen Allison, Newsham Ward Councillor.
Andrew Marchington, Goka Ward.
Jo Lawson, Crossland Neverton Ward Councillor.
Councillor Anwar, Dewsbury West.
Afak Butt, Hetmondwake. Councillor Adam Gregg, Lindley Ward.
Councillor Tim Bamford, Denberdale Ward.
Councillor Donna Bellamy, Home Valley North Ward.
Fiona Goldsmith, Group Leader for Licensing.
Russell Williams, Operational Manager within Public Protection.
Martin Wood, Head of Public Protection.
Thank you, everyone. Do we have any substitutes today?
No substitutes, Chair.
Any apologies?
Chair, Councillor Carol Patterson, she might be coming late. Yeah.
Any other apologies?
None to report, Chair.
Okay, so minutes of the previous meeting that took place on the 1st of February 2023. Can we have a show of hands if we're in agreement with the information that's provided for all those who attended? Are we happy to say those are correct record?
Yes, Councillor Sokal and Councillor Crooks raise their hands.
Thank you. Any declaration of interest to declare from anyone? Admissions of the public. This has been webcast and we have members of the public with us today. Any deputations or petitions?
None received, Chair.
Public question time. Any questions?
Again, none received.
Right, so we'll go straight into the agenda, full agenda item. So we have a licensing services update report.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the purpose of the report today is just to give some information to members about the activities that the licensing service have undertaken from October 22 to the 31st of March 23. So we tend to do them every 6 months, so you'll get a 6-monthly report. As you can see from section 2, as of 24th of May 2023, the number of current Hackney Carriage and private hire licences that we have in force from that date were 5,322. The reason why I do it as a specific date, because even within the same day, the numbers can fluctuate depending upon how many applications are processed. In 2.3, you can see the following table within 2.3 sets out the number of private hire and Hackney Carriage applications that we've processed within the service between the 1st of October and the 31st of March 23. You'll see that we've done 115 Hackney Carriage vehicles, new or renewal, dual driver's licences, 188 new, 654 renewal, private hire operators, 24 new, 42 renewal, private Hackney Carriage and private hire drivers, we've done 274 new and 758 renewals. So that's taken us to a total within that period of processing 2,055 taxi, so that's Hackney Carriage and private hire licences. You can also see the numbers of vehicles that have been tested at both George Street and Vine Street testing stations. And it also gives you details of the numbers that have passed and failed within the testing regime. With regard to service standards, so in August 2021 we adopted some service standards that were brought to members for approval. You can see from the first table, between October 22 and March 23, we have been in target for 54% of driver applications, 79% vehicle applications and 73% operator applications. If members were to move on to paragraph 2.6, you can see that the previous 6 months to that, we were 100% with drivers, 98% with vehicles and 96% with operators. Members will probably note there has been a drop in the service standards. This has been due to a number of resourcing issues over the festive period when this report was done for. We did have a number of absences of staff mixed with a number of applications, so we're getting an increase in new applications. It has resulted in the drop. With regard to our delegated decision making, so these are the decisions that myself as group leader will make with regard to the fitness and suitability of either applicants or existing licensed drivers. I'll just quickly run through the decisions and the reasons for the decisions. So the first one, it was a new driver who'd been revoked due to a conviction for a Section 39 offence, which is classed as common assault. The decision with that one was that the licence was issued with a warning. The reason for that decision was length of time following the date of the conviction, so it had been a lengthy period from the date of conviction, and evidence supplied by the applicant that they'd attended courses to improve themselves and they were honest throughout their process. The second one is there were three in total existing drivers that we had immediately suspended. All of those reasons were in relation to alleged sexual offences. There was the fifth one is an existing driver who had been convicted for perverting the course of justice. There was no negative history recorded against the driver, so it's somebody that had been an existing driver with us for a while. No points on the licence. They were honest throughout the investigation process and therefore they were just issued with a warning letter. The next one is existing driver who had 6 points on their DVLA licence for mobile phone usage. They had 3 points for speeding and they failed to notify the service. I actually met with the driver due to them falling within policy. They provided some exceptional circumstances at that meeting. I obviously won't go into the details because that won't be appropriate, but the decision with regard to that one, following consideration of those exceptional circumstances, was a formal warning letter was issued on that occasion. With regard to the next one, it was minor traffic or vehicle-related offences. We had an existing driver who had 8 points on their DVLA licence. They did notify us of those points. They were honest throughout, and they had a clear history with us. And the decision with that one was that a warning letter was issued. And the final one was we had an existing driver who had 6 points for driving a vehicle without the correct insurance. An explanation and reasoning was given, and it was to do with them having the wrong type of insurance. So it was a genuine mistake. In fact, to the point where when I read it, I thought, I didn't even know that was possible. You know, it was one of those scenarios where it really was an exception to the rule scenario. So the decision with that one was a warning letter was issued. So we'll move swiftly on. So Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Fee Review. So within the licensing regime, we have licensing fees. Some are statutory, some are not. The Hackney Carriage and private hire licensing fees have not been reviewed since 2015. The guidance is that we should really review it every 3 years. So we will be undertaking a review and a consultation on those fees imminently, and the report will be brought back to members once we've completed the consultation. Because it's a statutory process, we didn't need to come and get approval from members to go out to consult. So the consultation will be starting imminently though, and a report will be brought back. We also are looking at ways in which we can provide a better service for our applicants. One of the things that we're looking at is to introduce what we call a restricted licence. So a restricted licence will be a licence that somebody can get to be able to do school contracts only and not do normal Hackney Carriage and private hire work. So they can just apply to become a school run driver without needing to become a full licensed driver. So there will be a slightly different process, slightly different fee, and the outcome is they will be restricted to only doing school runs. That in itself should help ourselves and help the drivers for those that just want to do the school runs, and in addition to that it will help our colleagues within the school transport team who do struggle to be able to fulfil all the required bookings that they have. So moving on to the Licensing Act, the following table at 2.10 sets out the number of Licensing Act applications that we processed between the 1st of October and the 31st of March. For new applications we processed 29, we processed 6 full variations, 7 minor variations, 42 transfer and 282 temporary event notices. So that in total is 366. We're not seeing a massive increase in numbers, but as everybody will be aware, there is the cost of living out there, and as we all know, a lot of pubs are struggling at the moment. So I think the fact that we're keeping quite even with the numbers is actually quite a good sign at the moment. So within that time frame as well, there were a number of applications that went to a panel hearing, and all of those that went were granted bar one, which was a personal licence application. So in total, between the 1st of October and the 31st of March, we as a service in total received 2,854 applications to process. Within April, the previous 6-month period was 2,836, so we've seen a slight increase in the number from the previous 6-month period. We do a lot of partnership working within the licensing service, and one of the things that we do quite frequently is we work with trading standards, and they are regularly visiting the borough to do visits to premises where there may be illegal tobacco, cigarettes, vapes being sold. So in December 22, 4 premises in South Kirklees were visited. During this, a total of 1,040 times 20 packets of cigarettes, 96 times 50-gram pouches of hand-rolling tobacco, and 1,519 oversized vapes, and 18 times 509 kilogram pouches of shisha tobacco were seized. In January 23, 4 premises in both North and South Kirklees were visited. During this, a total of 3,407 times 20 packets of cigarettes, 243 times 50-gram pouches of hand-rolling tobacco, 439 oversized vapes, 4 pouches of shisha tobacco, and 218 electrical items, and a quantity of perfumes were also seized. Also within licensing service, we like to do quite a lot of proactive enforcement work, and we do this working with our partners in the police and in DVSA. which is the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency, for anybody that doesn't know. So within that time period that we're reporting on, we have done 3 operations with those. I won't go through every single issue that was highlighted. I'm hoping you've seen, but we did find a number of issues with a number of vehicles. We also found that there were vehicles that were absolutely fine. So on the 24th of August, we checked 25 licensed vehicles. Out of that 25, 15 of them were absolutely fine. On November 22, out of 18 licensed vehicles checked, 5 had no defects. And in December 22, 9 vehicles were checked and 7 out of the 9 didn't have any defects. So in conclusion, that is the end of the report, and members are asked to note it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Comments and questions, Councillor Marchington?
Yeah, thank you, Fiona, for the report. It's very interesting. Just a question about the licence specific to school runs. I mean, what's the advantage to the licence holder of being restricted just to the school runs?
So what school transport are finding is that when they speak to operators, the operators are telling us that they have people that want to do just school runs, but when you apply for a normal private hire or hackney carriage licence, the training that you have to go through is quite extensive. Isn't necessarily all of it is applicable to school transport journeys. So we have looked at how we can change that training and make the process a bit quicker so that it just allows a person to do those runs, those school runs, without having to go through the whole process of becoming a fully fledged private hire driver. And it's predominantly people that are retired or want to do some give something back to the community by driving these vehicles. So it's to make it slightly easier for those without them having to become a fully fledged private hire driver. The aim of it is to allow operators to take these drivers on and increase the pool of drivers that they've got to provide school transport. And they'd be restricted, like Fiona said, to just doing that type of work.
Thank you.
Councillor Sokar?
Yeah, I just want to ask a question on the compliance test, which is on page 11. Yeah. Where it says there are 2 depots, the George Street test station and Wine Street and Huddersfield. If we go through I read it, more failing rate is in George Street than in Wine Street and Huddersfield, and more passing rate is in Huddersfield, Wine Street than George Street. I know there are slightly bit more applicants on George Street than Huddersfield, but not much. So why is there so much differences?
I think that's actually quite a difficult question to answer because we don't have the data as to the reasons why we've got the why they were failed. I think maybe looking forward, we can look to speak to the garage and see if when they send us statistics, they can actually send us the reasons why vehicles are failing, and then that hopefully will give you a better understanding as to the reasons why. For the MOT failures, as you know, it's a standard, although it's a compliance test and they don't necessarily have an MOT, they go through the same process as an MOT. So it would be useful maybe if we, going forward, get that information.
Next time, yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So my question follows on slightly from what Councillor Soka was saying in terms of the testing. So do we have data as to how long taxi drivers are waiting to get a test? Because a lot of feedback that we've had is that, the wait times are quite long. And following on from that, is there any scope, or what's the rationale behind only having 2 testing stations, and is there any scope to potentially add more testing stations?
Okay, thank you for the question. It is actually quite an apt question because, you know, it has been brought to our attention that the waiting times are getting longer. We are on with looking at a permanent solution with relation to that, which when we have that solution, we will be bringing to members for a decision. We have put some temporary measures in place at the moment for those people that are having to wait lengthy periods of time or are at risk of their licence lapsing before they can get a test. So we have looked at doing that.
One of the reasons for keeping it in-house and to the council's own testing stations is that there's no incentive for the council to fail a vehicle. It provides consistency. The same testers testing all those vehicles. There's no, like I say, incentive to fail that vehicle because they don't carry out repairs. And it provides that consistency, but we do appreciate that there is a delay by only having the two. And we have put some temporary measures in place where if a driver can't get in a reasonable time within those testing stations, then we would look to allow that driver to go to an external MOT station for a short period of time. We will then assess that and see, like Fiona said, what sort of longer term solution we can do and whether there is something else we can do with external garages as well as our own internal garages.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to see that, you know, you've recognised the problem, and we look forward to seeing what you come back with.
Thanks, Chair. I'd take my car to Vine Street, I think. They always seem to have better numbers. I just wanted to ask two questions, if that's all right. The first was on service standards, and you've said already that there was an issue with staffing over that period of time, but you also said that there was perhaps an issue with overall numbers. And I'd noted, because when I'd read the papers before about this, that the numbers didn't seem to be all that different, but I guess the main thing is just some reassurance that standards will be, that things have been put in place to raise standards again, because it did seem quite a marked drop. But the main thing that I wanted to ask about was on the failure rate for vehicles when they do spot checks, because it seems very high. So the three sets of tests that you've looked at, some of them are sort of 70% failure rates. And we also had in Ward a report from the neighbourhood policing team, the rural update, where they reported on a spot inspection that they'd done in Home Firth. And again, I didn't record the numbers, but the failure rate was very high. And so I wondered if there was anything we could do to encourage drivers to do just a daily check of their vehicle, because some of these failures are just like a light's not working. Well, it only takes 30 seconds to check that, and you should be making sure your car's compliant. But I also wondered, and I think we'll be looking at this under agenda item 9, whether some of the condition of vehicle stipulations that we're making might be a little bit over onerous. You know, a car being clean or all of the internal buttons working perfectly. It's not necessarily a safety issue, so perhaps we need to be a little bit less stringent on that. But really, anyway, my question is about service standards. Vehicle standards and how we can increase the pass rate, because obviously if some of those are safety issues, we don't want 70% of the vehicles on the road failing a spot safety check. Thanks.
Thank you for the question. Yes, so I think with regard to the service standards, as you know, we over that period we were struggling with numbers of staff due to illness and whatnot. We have had a number of staff leave as well. As everybody knows, that there's been a freeze on recruitment, so we have struggled to fulfill the roles again. From these data, you probably can't see that we have had a bit of an increase in numbers, but during that period we have, and they are sat there waiting for us to deal with them, so they won't be part of the figures because they haven't been processed yet. With regard to the other thing, sorry, I just moved on then, didn't I? I totally appreciate what you were saying about the spot checks. We are looking at the vehicle policy today, which is another item which we are looking to review. I think, you know, it is simple things such as our drivers checking their vehicles before they go. One thing that we can do is we can add it to our newsletter, so when it goes out, just a reminder, can everybody make sure that they're checking their vehicles, make sure that, you know, if you stopped, everything's in working order. I mean, every road user in theory should be checking the vehicle before they get And I think for a licensed driver, I think it's even more important.
Thank you, Chair. My question is following Councillor Suckles and Councillor Zaman's, just on the testing. The first one is the testing that's done, which is other than the normal MOT that cars have. Is this done by any other authority? Is this just for Kirklees that does this? And the second one is we have complaints from people, from drivers, that say that once the test has been done, until they don't get the confirmation certificate, they can't drive. So is that something that you could possibly shed some light on as to why that is? As in, would there be a way in which we could, if the car has been passed, that they can drive, and if a check is done, then there is that confirmation there, but they have to wait some time for that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. So with regard to them actually having, so when they do a compliance test, so the compliance test in itself is a test that is to MOT standard and above. So they do the MOT, which is your standard MOT, and then there are additional things that we look at. We do have a checklist of all the additions that are looked at in addition to the MOT. With regard to them having the compliance test, so once they've had the compliance test, that's not the whole part of the process. They have to apply for their licence to go with it. So the compliance test is just one part. So it's similar to a driver wanting to become a licensed driver. They have to go through the testing before they can get the licence. We advise that people submit their applications in advance. And I would like to think that the trade reps will agree with me here that we do our utmost to try and ensure that everybody that has a compliance test, even if it's on the day of expiry, we will get them that licence on that day so that they're not out of work. It's quite rare. We do get the odd one that slips through the net. Don't get me wrong, but you get that with everything in life. There are people that submit their applications late. They don't phone up for a compliance test in time. The onus has to be a little bit on the applicant because it's their responsibility to ensure their licence is there.
Yeah, and just to add to what Fiona said, that we aren't the only authority that do that. A lot of authorities do have additional items that they test on and apply a compliance test rather than just a standard MOT. I think across West Yorkshire we all operate to the same, so you get a compliance certificate rather than an MOT test because they test over and above MOT standards, and that's reflected nationally.
Okay, any more questions or comments? All right, moving on to item 8 then. This report is in relation to the driver training policy, the geographical knowledge test. Fiona?
Thank you, Chair. So this report is for members to consider whether we should remove the requirement for all new Hackney carriage and private hire driver applicants to complete the local geographical knowledge test. So at Appendix 1, you can see there is the copy of the driver training policy. This policy was adopted at the meeting of the Licensing Safety Committee on Tuesday the 11th of June in 2019. In August 22, so August last year, the Department for Transport have carried out a consultation on their new taxi and private hire licensing best practice guidance. From that guidance, it's appearing that they believe that private hire vehicles, private hire drivers should not have to do a geographical knowledge test. I can't say the word, so apologies for that. It didn't come out very well at all. So it basically says taxi drivers need a good working knowledge of the area for which they're licensed because taxis can be hired immediately and directly with the driver at ranks or on street, so drivers are not able to prepare a route. Licensing authorities should therefore require prospective taxi drivers to pass a test of local topographical knowledge as a prerequisite to the first grant of a licence. The department's view is that the stringency of the test should reflect the complexity or is otherwise of the local geography in accordance with the principle of ensuring that barriers to entry are not unnecessarily high. Private hire vehicles are not legally available for immediate hiring, so you can't just jump in a private hire car, you have to pre-book it. So therefore, the private hire vehicle or the prospective passenger must go through an operator, and the driver then has the opportunity to check where they're going first. They can put the details in their sat-nav and plan it on the navigation systems. And so what they're saying is we can, as a licensing authority, request that private hire drivers go for that. So currently we do, and we request that all new applicants do the I can't say it, I'm just going to say geographical knowledge test. But within Kirklees, we have a slight problem in that, because most authorities have two different licence holders. You have a Hackney Carriage licence driver, or you're a private hire licence driver. Here in Kirklees, we do a dual badge. So that dual badge covers every driver to do either. Another aspect of it is, within Kirklees, we have a cap on the number of Hackney Carriage vehicles that we licence. The total number at the moment, and the cap is at 224. Of those 224, I'm confident in saying the majority of those 224 have been with the same licence holder or within the same family of licence holders for quite a number of years. And it would be very rare for the licensing service to get a new driver who will come in and then become a Hackney Carriage driver. So what we are recommending as a licensing authority due to that is that we are going preempting what the best practice guidance is saying, and we would like to remove the geographical knowledge test for all new driver applicants. However, what we would like to do is to keep the geographical knowledge test as it is for those persons who may have number of complaints about their driving, not knowing where they're going, getting lost. And if we get those types of complaints, we can then utilise that knowledge test to require those persons to take it to ensure that they are familiar with the area. So members are recommended to remove the requirements for the knowledge test for all new drivers. And the reason for that recommendation is that private hire licensing best practice guidance recommends that all local authorities should remove the requirement for private hire drivers. Within Kirklees, we've got about 2,850 licensed drivers. So if you marry that with the 224 Hackneys, if we were to keep it just for those people that were going to become a Hackney driver, we probably would only do it once every 2 or 3 years anyway, because we tend not to get, I think since I've been in post, to my knowledge, only one new driver applicant has become a Hackney driver. So therefore, members are asked to resolve either to remove the requirement to undertake and pass the geographical knowledge test for all new driver applicants, to remove the requirement to undertake and pass the geographical knowledge test for all new Hackney Carriage and private hire driver applicants, or to keep the requirement for all new Hackney Carriage and private hire drivers to undertake and pass the geographical knowledge test. I think if you look at number 2, that should scrap the Hackney Carriage and it should just say private hire. My apologies. Yes, sorry, I think we've put it in by accident. My apologies for that.
Thank you, Chair. I'm quite happy with the officer recommendation to remove the requirement for geographical knowledge. I think it was an unwanted condition for the new applicant and taxi driver. And these days, there is new technology moving fast. Taxi driver or other member have their own mobile. They can put up certain satellite. And some private garages, like I had the opportunity to book a taxi with the Mount Taxi in Marcia. They always keep on the record, on the radar system, yes, where the taxi, where it's coming now, how long it will wait, you have to wait. I think some private operators are setting up a good example. So I think there was no need now for geographical knowledge. So I'm quite happy with the officer recommendation. application. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick one for my own information. The current geographical knowledge test, is there a cost element to that? And if there is, who charges that and who does the money go to?
Thank you for the question. So currently the geographical knowledge test forms part of the driver training package. It is delivered by the licensing service and it's a cost recovery for the full training package. That is done by the licensing service and it goes into the licensing budget.
So would by scrapping the test, would the council be reducing the amount of revenue that it receives? And if so, do we know by how much?
Thank you for the question. There is another section that we are looking to introduce to replace the knowledge test at the end of so when we do the theory training test, the knowledge test sits at the end of it as an additional thing that they do. So they just come in, sit the test after they've done the rest. We do have another section that we are going to be adding into that test, which will cover the time frame that the knowledge test had. So there wouldn't at the moment be a reduction in the price. However, as we're reviewing all our fees, we will review whether or not the costing has either increased or decreased at that point in time.
All right, okay, yeah, because I am in favour of scrapping the test, but it's just, you know, with current climate, it's just good to be conscious of these things.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think I agree in line with officers' recommendations about it being, certainly for private hire, happy with that. I think also building on what Councillor Sokol said about the change of technologies and real-time route planning. So even if you've got a good working knowledge of the area, there might be several routes for a particular journey, and you know which one is the best one is dependent on what's happening further on the way. And I think if we're moving towards a stage where all drivers do some, it's worth spending a minute looking at, even if you're a Hackney carriage driver, to look at a device to see which is of the 3 or 4 routes from one place to another, which is the best to do. I think the other thing that was going through my mind again about linking it in with charges and costing, you've got different options. What is the quickest route, which is the one that saves you the most fuel, which one avoids particular types of journeys. So actually if we can build, build that in. So what's your which route is going to cost, somebody's hiring a vehicle might say I want to get somewhere reasonably quickly and safely, but also if you're not in a rush, you can do a more fuel efficient route as well. So if we can build that in the future, part of the test is how you use technologies well. It would be really good. Thank you.
Shall I start again? Sorry. So there's 3 options available to us today. We've had the report about this, and the 3 options are, first of all, to remove the requirement to undertake and pass the geographical knowledge test for all new drivers, as recommended by officers. Alternatively, to remove the requirement to undertake and pass the geographical test for all new private hire drivers, or alternatively, to keep the requirement for all new Hackney carriage private hire drivers to undertake and pass the geographical test. So we'll go with the first one to begin with, and can we have a show of hands? So the one that's recommended by the officers in respect of all new drivers, all new applications. Yeah, it looks like it's unanimous. Yep. Fantastic. No reason to go through the others. Okay. Moving on to item 9 then. which is the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Vehicle Policy Review. Over to you, Fiona.
Thank you, Chair. Could we please have the presentation for the vehicle policy popped up on screen, please? Perfect, thank you very much. So the reason for this report today is the current vehicle specification that you can find at Appendix 1 has not been reviewed or amended since July 2008, so it's quite an old bit of the policy. The reason why we decided to look at it, number one, is because it hasn't been looked at for quite some time, and number two, because we were when we were engaging with our colleagues, so all the association representatives and the trade reps, there were a number of things that have been brought to our attention with regard to it that the trade weren't particularly happy with. So we thought we would take an overall view of the whole policy. So we've undertaken the review. We've listened to what the trade reps and the trade have said, and the draft policy can be found now at Appendix 2. What I'm going to quickly do with you, and it will be quick because I don't want you to do the death by PowerPoint thing for too long with you, because you've all had to endure my training, which took a while, didn't it? So Appendix 2 is at page 47 for those that need to see it. I'm just going to quickly run through the main changes that we are proposing within the policy. So the first one is vehicle colour. So currently we've got both private hire and Hackney Carriage vehicles, and they can both be white. In a lot of other authorities you will find that the Hackney Carriages are a distinct colour that other private hire vehicles cannot be. So the differentiation between a Hackney and a private hire is that in other authorities you will get a white vehicle, it's taxi sign, it has different signage, different rear plates, all different colours. I think down in Bournemouth, I think it is that their Hackneys are pink. So, I mean, this is an option if anybody wants to think about it. So I think the first proposal is that we restrict the Hackneys to be in one colour and don't allow private hire to be that same colour. Now, we've gone with white because the Hackneys are currently white. Members may, when we get the results, see something and say maybe we can tweak it or change it slightly. That's fine. But that is the proposal. There are a couple of reasons for this, and I can give you two examples, one of which happened yesterday. Somebody had a Hackney Carriage vehicle. They sold it to a private hire. That private hire driver took it to be tested. The tester will have gone, this was a renewal, thinking it's a Hackney Carriage because it was a Hackney Carriage. Did the test, it passed the test. They submitted a brand new application with us. We just went, we've got a new vehicle, it meets the specification. We gave them the licence, we gave them everything. And then we received correspondence to say that that private hire vehicle had Hackney Carriage door signs on it still with a different number. So because we've allowed it to happen, and this isn't the first occasion where something like this has happened, so that is the main primary reason. It's already quite difficult for members of the public to understand the difference between Hackney Carriage and private hire vehicles. A lot of them don't know that you can't just jump into a private hire vehicle. They don't know that you can flag down a Hackney Carriage. So actually to get that out there and for a public safety purpose, that's the reason why we've requested that. So we've also got an issue in Kirklees where we struggle to maintain wheelchair accessible vehicles. So all new vehicles currently, when we get a new vehicle application, have to meet the Euro 6 diesel standards. They have to be at least Euro 6. What we are proposing, and we have consulted with because obviously we have to look at the environment and everything, so we have consulted with our climate colleagues, and due to the balance between the need for wheelchair accessible vehicles and to help the climate, we are proposing to allow for the lesser Euro 5 standard for wheelchair accessible vehicles. With regard to door signs, so currently all vehicles that are licensed have to have adhesive door signs on both private hire and Hackney Carriage. However, we know that most private hire drivers want the freedom to be able to work for multiple operators. Therefore, the proposal is we maintain a Kirklees standard door sign, so it will be a minimal sign, some A4 size, Kirklees Council, pre-book only, number of the vehicle, plate number, and the number of passengers. And then if they're private hire, depending upon which operator they're choosing to work for, they can put a magnetic door sign advertising that private hire operator. You'll probably have seen there are a number of them that work for multiple, and they've got inserts and sticky tape, and there's 2 signs, and quite honestly, it doesn't look brilliant. So this way, at least, it gives the drivers the freedom to be able to work for who they want to, and also it will look aesthetically more pleasing to the eye for the customers. And it also will stop the confusion as to whether or not they're getting in one operator vehicle or another, because potentially they could have 2 or 3 operators listed, and it will help with the customers and their knowledge. Age limits. So currently our policy states that all licences, so all vehicle licences will cease to be licensed at 10 years. So when that vehicle hits 10, it ceases to be licensed. We have got the temporary measure in place due to the cost of living stuff that we've increased it as a temporary measure to 12 at the moment for all vehicles. This doesn't include wheelchair accessible or ultra low emission vehicles. This is just your bog standard vehicle. So the proposal is that only current licensed Euro 5 vehicles, so the ones that are already licensed, because as you know, we won't license a new one that's Euro 5 diesel, but if anything that we've got existing that we're allowing to get to the end of its life gets to 10, at that point, that vehicle comes off the road. The policy also currently states that all vehicles other than wheelchair accessible and ultra immersion should cease to be licensed at 10. The proposal is that if all vehicles other than WAV and ULEV should cease to be licensed at 13 of age. So anything that's Euro 6 or above, so the more environmentally friendly vehicles, they can be licensed for an extra 3 years. The current age limit for wheelchair accessible is 12 years. As we've already previously discussed, we really struggle with wheelchair accessible vehicles. We struggle to encourage drivers to purchase wheelchair accessible vehicles. So the proposal for wheelchair accessible vehicles is that they will be allowed to go up to 16 years of age. Similarly for ultra low emissions, so those really clean engines that we've got out there that are really not as bad for the environment as a normal vehicle, the proposal for those is that they can also go up to 16 years of age. We're proposing, because obviously comments noted from a number of you today is, oh, well, they're failing spot checks and the statistics at the garages are a bit high. What we're proposing that is all those that are to be licensed for that extra time will be required to go for 2 compliance tests per year. So when they hit 13, from the age of 13 to 16, they will go for 2 compliance tests. So this is a bit of a controversial one, but we're looking for incentives. We want to go electric. We want our trade to go electric, but we know that electric vehicles are extremely costly. So we needed to find a way to ensure that those vehicles, once we've got them, they can stay on the road and they're not having to spend the money. So it's proposed that for electric vehicles, we would allow them to go to 20 years. But between the age of 13 to 20, they go through 2 compliance tests per year. CCTV is another one that we've looked at in the policy. So we don't currently have a policy on CCTV. As an authority, we don't say people can have CCTV. We don't say they can't. But really, we need to have something in the policy to put our position on what we believe we should be doing for CCTV. So it's proposed that CCTV should be the choice and the responsibility of that vehicle proprietor. Just in addition to that, when we've worded it, it also says it's the responsibility of the proprietor to ensure that they do what they need to do with regard to the data and contact the information and commissioners to make sure that they've got all the correct documentation for it and everything. But the onus is on the driver rather than the authority to maintain or to look after that data. Window tints. So currently our policy states that all windows other than your front windscreen and front passenger windows, so they're statutory tints, so that you can't go below that or you're breaking the law. Any other window should transmit a minimum of 21% light into the vehicle. So for those that don't understand, you've got to be able to get a certain amount of light into the vehicle. So the darker they are, the less percentage it is. The proposal is to allow for people to purchase manufacturer's standard tints on all windows other than the front windscreen and the front passenger. So as it comes off the production belt, if it's got a tint that might be lower than 21%, it's come off the manufacturer's machine. That way we will allow for that to be licensed. However, we will not allow for blackout, privacy glass or self-applied material or film within that vehicle. So if somebody purchases a vehicle and gets some blackout tints and puts them on the windscreen, on the windows, we wouldn't allow for that. Currently, we don't actually license SUVs, which are sports utility vehicles, so your 4x4s, we don't license those. The proposal, though, is that we will be looking to cease licensing multi-purpose vehicles and the sports utility vehicles. So for those that don't know what a multi-purpose vehicle is, it's one of those vehicles that has 2 extra seats in the boot of the car that you can pull up. You know, your family vehicles that if you've got more than 3 kids, you'd put a couple of the little ones in the back type of scenario. So because we've had a few issues with these, some are better than others, but in reality, it's very unlikely you would be able to get 2 grown men in the back of one of those vehicles safely. So to avoid the grey area of, is this one okay, is that one okay, I think the proposal is going forward to stop those from being licensed. Obviously, if we've got existing on the road, they will be allowed to live out their life because we can't revoke a licence for it. But going forward, I think that's the proposal is that we remove that. So, do we have any questions? I do have to say that at the moment, all we're doing today is we are asking for members to allow for us to go out to consult on the policy. So this isn't a set in stone scenario. This is us listening to what the trade have said to us. Prior to us amending it, we did a number of drop-in sessions throughout the borough, and we utilised that time to get the comments from the drivers that came to the drop-in sessions. We've also discussed it at both Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Trade Association meetings and listened to what the drivers have had to say, and that's how we've got to where we are with the policy. So members are recommended to note the report and appendices and instruct officers to commence a 12-week consultation regarding the changes to the existing vehicle specification, and then for us to report back the results for a decision at a future meeting. I've also, prior to doing this, I have prepared some consultation questions which you can find at Appendix 3. So the reason why I've done that is because I would quite like members to just confirm that they're happy with the questions. I think in the past we've found that we've been asked to go consult, we've consulted, we've done questions, and the comments have been it's either too complicated or it's not enough. So actually for members to have a look at the questions prior to us consulting, if that's what members are wanting us to do, I think that would be really handy. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
My question is in relation to the age limit. Have you consulted any other authorities regarding their age limit?
No, because we haven't commenced consultation as yet. I do know that I think within West Yorkshire currently, there is, I think the majority of the West Yorkshire authorities are looking at their vehicle policies, so theirs may change as well. What we will do is once we've done our consultation, when we do consult, formal consultation, all of our neighbouring authorities get consulted as well. So they will feed back to us. And for the final report, I would have that information in there for you for consideration at that point in time. So at the moment, all we've done is collated the information from our engagement with the trade. We've looked at what the existing policy is. We've done the proposed amendments. Then we will consult if members are minded to allow for us to do that. And then we'll pull it all together at the end.
Just to make you aware that Leeds City Council 2 weeks ago held their annual licensing committee, and they've raised their vehicle age to 15 years for Hackney and private hire.
Thanks, Chair. I guess this just follows on from what I said before. You know, we're going out to consult on a set of restrictions on condition of vehicles, and some of the restrictions seem to me to be unnecessary. For example, a working sunroof doesn't seem to be a functional part of a private hire vehicle. An automatic boot in functional condition doesn't seem, you know, there just seem to be a set of things, but I guess we'll pick that up when the consultation comes back. I'd made a note about MPVs, and you've explained some of the reason why we're proposing to remove them, but I'm aware that they've clearly passed a kind of national legal standard for carrying 7 people or whatever it is, so I don't necessarily agree that we need to apply a higher level of condition on that use of vehicle. And with respect to MPVs, in the previous policy we allowed MPVs to tow trailers, and it looks like one of the things that we're proposing to change now is removing trailers from any private hire vehicle or taxi vehicle, and I don't really understand why we shouldn't allow someone to use a trailer. For example, if they're doing airport runs and they've got a full car, they might want to use a trailer, and why not, sort of thing. And then just one, sorry to go on a bit, one slight gripe I have is use of inches. So some of the specifications for vehicles are specifying, say, for example, distance from the ground to entrance to the vehicle in inches. Why are we using inches, whereas the sign is specified in metres? So there's an inconsistency in unit use, which has always been a personal gripe of mine. Thanks.
Thank you. That's noted with regard to the changes. We can make sure that we've got more clear usage of units when we do that. I think it likely is some of them have been from the previous thing, and that's just how it's always said it. So. And with regard to the other comments, again, this is why we're going out to consult, so that people can put their views in, and then members can make the decision at the end of the consultation.
Sorry, but is there a specific reason why we've opted to remove the allowance for a use of a trailer across the board, or is it?
No, there's no specific reason. So if people are minded to say that they're not happy with that decision, then that's something that can be put in comments.
Thanks, Chair. So I've got a couple of questions and points. The first one follows on from Councillor Anwar's point about the age limit. So as far as I'm aware, the DFT guidance states that there should be no age limit. Correct me if I'm wrong. So I think what I saw from the slide is that there was multiple slides about limiting age for this type of vehicle, this type of vehicle, this type of vehicle. Do you not think that we should be applying our focus more on to whether the vehicle is fit for purpose rather than a blanket ban on because a vehicle is a certain age, it should or should not be allowed? Because one, it deters drivers from putting that effort into their vehicle on a regular basis of keeping it clean, maintaining it. So in essence, you could get 2 identical vehicles that are 10 years old, and one is not fit for purpose, and one is. So that's something that I'd suggest, and I welcome any comments.
Yeah, thank you for your comments. I think again, it's a decision for members. So you know, we have been through the policy from our licensing point of view. We've looked at the policy. And we've done the amendments after consultations with the trade. If members are minded to amend or change when they make their final decision, what is in the draft policy, that's a gift for the members.
Thanks. Next question. So I just wanted some more information on the position of hydrogen-powered vehicles. So where does the policy stand on if a vehicle is to be fitted with a hydrogen power unit by an approved installer and the correct certificates are obtained, then what is the process or the eligibility for a license to be given?
So somebody's converting it from just a normal petrol or diesel
Essentially, yes.
and to making it a hybrid. So that would need an IVA, I would imagine, an IVA certificate, because it's a complete what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, change to the construction of the actual vehicle. So if somebody's wanting to do that, that's absolutely fine, but we need the IVA certificate to prove that it has been converted safely and properly.
Okay, and do you feel like that is adequately covered by the current policy, or perhaps there may be scope to implement something that clarifies that?
I think ultimately, as it stands, if somebody came and did that now, that's how we would look at it. So we would say to them, it's the same for any conversion. So if you've got a vehicle that was a van and they convert it to something else, any major changes to that vehicle, it needs what we call an IVA certificate. So I think although this is the vehicle policy here, the main body of the policy does go into a little bit more detail about that, I believe. But I'm happy with, you know, if that's what members are wanting us to add that in, then that again is a decision for members when they're making a decision on the final policy.
Thank you. And next, if I could just refer your attention to page 68 at point 2.15. It says that Leeds have carried out a review of their policy, and the current policy has been in effect since October 2022.
So can you just confirm the page?
Page 68 of, is it the bundle pack?
So when's item 10?
Sorry, yeah, no, ignore that. Ignore that.
It's item 10, isn't it? It's agenda item. Could made a bit of a mistake. If it's relevant, you can still mention it in your comments or questions.
It was just on, it is relevant because it's in relation to the suitability policy. So as far as I'm aware, Leeds have only reviewed the point about the points issue rather than a full overhaul of the policy. So I think it's just a point of order to just clarify whether that's the case.
So it's referring to those. Yeah. Yeah, it's the next item. Are you able to comment? Is it?
I think once we get onto that report, when we go through the actual report, if you've still got that question, we would answer it there, because that question doesn't relate to the vehicle policy.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. So I wanted
And
clarity.
just a few more. So it's more about process. So I think currently what's being proposed is quite arbitrary, in the sense that currently the way that decisions are made is by, and I know it's currently for you, but it's essentially decided by a single person. So things like that have been put into the suitability policy about if someone disagrees with the decision, then having a right to appeal. I don't understand why.
Sorry, Councillor Zaman, you're going into item 10 again. The suitability policy.
All right. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's
Do you want to keep it until the next one?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Councillor Sokal.
Yeah. Just follow on the question. We and SUV vehicle. Do you know the number of the taxi we got at the moment?
The number of SUVs and
Yeah.
so we don't currently license SUVs, the
And
sports utility. MPVs, I don't know the exact number. I know there's not a huge amount of them, but we'd have to check the system, but I'll happily send you that information outside the meeting.
I mean, you propose we stop the adult passenger carry on the back, you know, it's not safe, yeah. But if we stop there, how would you monitor they're not carrying those passengers on the back?
Well, we could condition their licence to say they couldn't use it for passengers, for example.
It's very difficult to check. Yeah.
Yeah, granted it is a difficult one. I think that one of the reasons why it's come to the forefront is when the garage do the test, the garage say these are not really suitable.
I think just to expand further, and this picks up on a point made by Councillor Crook around why, you know, the justification for that. As a member of the public, if you're looking to buy one of these vehicles, you go and view it, you know what your family circumstances are, who's going to be sitting in the back, you test that vehicle, you know whether you can fit in, whether all your family can fit in, whether your children are comfortable in those seats, and you get to make that assessment. These vehicles that are licensed, the person getting into that vehicle doesn't have that opportunity to assess that. So you could have a family of 5, 6 people going to an airport, all of those adults, and the operator sends an MPV. With your suitcases, 5, 6 adults, you would struggle to get in one of those vehicles. And that's, you've got no choice in that. The operator determines what vehicle they send. And we think that that's not a right level of service, and it's not safe as well, based on what the garages have said.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just want to follow on with the age stuff, and I think the phrase that was used, I'm a bit worried about arbitrary age limits, vehicle condition. So I think there's an opportunity on the previous discussion about using some of the data we've got about the vehicles are checked, particularly as they get older, and just see what it is. I think we've had this discussion before. A well-maintained older vehicle is better than a poorly maintained newer vehicle. I think the thing we do need to keep an eye on is some of the features of modern vehicles coming through. So there might be times when we do need to review that, and that's come up with the MPVs and the SUV issue. So I think there might be a question about how do you feel about removing the age limit, but having your vehicles checked more. I know that is a bit of that in terms of the double, 2 checks, compliance check to you. So we would want to see that and get some data-driven stuff. Point about the CCTV, and we've had a discussion about improving the cost of CCTV, both for in-vehicle and actually road stuff, has dropped. I know in the past we've talked about, as part of the violent crime reduction strategy, probably 10 years ago, and it was, these things might have been prohibitively expensive, but for the protection of the driver, if nothing else, actually to have strongly encourage, even if we don't want to mandate it, a reasonably inexpensive piece of technology that protects the driver, and also it probably gives a bit more confidence to the occupant of the vehicle as well. So might be worth asking a question about that. I'll strengthen the question about it. And the last question is just about, for my knowledge, so we've talked about having dual licence, so Hackney and private hire, and the colour of the vehicles. So I'm assuming, are they totally separate? If it's licensed as a Hackney carriage, you wouldn't be using it as a private hire vehicle. Am I right in thinking that? Because there's still, I need to understand that for me.
There is a bit of a grey area with that,
right,
I'm going to be honest with you. So a Hackney carriage vehicle is a Hackney. So the difference with it is, in Kirklees you'll see them, it's white, has a taxi sign on the side, it has a big door sign that says taxi on the side, stuck to the sides, both sides, and it has a plate at the back which is white in colour, white and blue I think it is. That's the differentiation, that's the Hackney. A private hire doesn't have the taxi sign because it's not a taxi. The private hire door signs will say advance bookings only. It will give you the details of the operator that person works for. And then on the rear of it, it has a yellow plate at the back, so it is slightly different. With regard to Hackneys being used for private hire purposes, they can do that. But there's still a Hackney. Once it's a Hackney, it's always a Hackney. So it can have two hats. A Hackney can have two hats. But if it's got that, if it is a Hackney and it's licensed as a Hackney, even if they're working as a private hire, if they're driving down, if they're licensed with us and they're driving down the street in Huddersfield, even if they're working at the private hire operator at that time, somebody can flag that vehicle down if the light's on, showing I'm available for hire. So it is a bit of a grey area, and I think for me it's about how we try and get the comms and the communication out to members of the public for them to differentiate it as well, for them to understand what the difference is.
So actually, so it's fine, isn't it? Because nobody should be getting booking a private hire vehicle expecting it to be a Hackney. If it works that way, the colouring works that way around, doesn't it? You might book a private hire vehicle and it turns out to be a Hackney carriage, which is fine.
Yeah.
What you shouldn't be doing is booking a Hackney carriage.
Well, you don't book a Hackney. Yeah, so you wouldn't book a Hackney carriage.
Yeah, you shouldn't be using it under that expectation, should you?
Yeah, so you can't just jump into a private hire like you would a Hackney.
Fine. That's fine. Okay. Yeah. I think that's yeah, I think that covers what I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Do the trade want to make any comments? Mr. Rashid and Mr. Mukhtar, no?
Just about MPVs, licensing want to scrap them. The issue we're going to have is if we're licensed to carry 4 passengers, but then we use our taxis for personal use, we could get stopped by police if we've got children in the back and potentially get done for carrying more passengers than what our Hackneys say.
So sorry. So the actual any existing, the policy wouldn't impact existing. So it would only be when you go to replace the vehicle that we would say no MPVs at that point. So anything that's already currently licensed would be able to remain licensed with the number of passengers that they've already got.
I'm just thinking in future as well.
Yeah.
Because I always buy a 6-seater.
Yeah. We had that debate, didn't we, at the time? Yeah, we did. Again, this is the point. We're consulting, so this is the view. This is what we're looking to do. It doesn't necessarily mean members will agree with it. Members may decide that they want to change it. You know, when we get all the consultation results back, that's when we can look at and analyse what the results say.
Okay, any more comments and questions before we go to the vote?
Chair.
Just to pick up on a couple of comments from councillors around having no limit. The proposed consultation questions don't actually ask that, but we can include that as a question if members would like us to do that. And for the next report, once consultation is done, we can work with Fleet to see if we can get some statistics on age limits, failure rates and what they are actually failing on, which will give members a more overall view of the status of vehicles and what condition they are at what age.
Yeah, I think Councillor Crook has proposed a good. We should allow those MPV vehicle to carry some passenger on the back seat because sometimes it's cheaper for family. Yeah. So we should not put any restriction on that. Thank you.
I think just to remind members, this is only seeking to consult, and it will be at the next report for members if they've got any suggestions to put forward, and then for committee to decide.
Okay, thanks for that, Russell. I was just about to make that point. Obviously, when it goes out to consultation, it enables everybody to consult, councillors, members of the public, the trade. So the more people who feed into it, the better the results will be to reflect what people think in Kirklees. Okay, so this particular agenda item, we've been asked to note the report and the appendices. We've been asked to instruct officers to commence a 12-week consultation, and the results of that consultation will be brought back at the next meeting, and also to agree the questions at Appendix 3. So can we show hands as to whether we're in agreement with that? Yeah, Okay, that's a majority. Fantastic. Right. Moving on to the next item.
Thank you, Chair. Could I have the other PowerPoint open now, please? Apologise in advance, this is a really hefty document that you've all got today. We like to try and be as thorough as we possibly can, so that you've got all the information in front of you to make an informed decision. So the purpose of this report is to inform members of their Licensing and Safety Committee the results of the consultation for the proposed changes to the Council's current Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Fitness and Suitability Policy. The proposed draft policy is shown at Appendix 1, which for members it is page 73 of your pack, just for ease for you. So at the meeting of the Licensing and Safety Committee in July 22, we presented a report outlining concerns that had been raised to ourselves regarding this policy. We informed members that it's normal practice for us to review policies every 3 to 5 years, and members requested that we go out to do on a 3-month consultation on some proposed draft changes. During the consultation, we consulted every licence holder, Public Health, LADO, Kirklees Safeguarding Children and Adults Board, Safer Kirklees, all ward councillors, all MPs, the Susie Lamplow Trust, the National Private Hire and Taxi Association, all our neighbouring authorities, all unions, West Yorkshire Police and members of the public via the council comms. In addition to this, we offered several drop-in sessions to the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire trade to attend, and they were in all areas within Kirklees. So we held one in Clackheaton, one in Dewsbury, one in Huddersfield, and then we did an additional one in Batley after a request. In total, from the survey, it resulted in 333 responses, which is actually quite good for a survey. 184 of those responses were members of the public. 122 were licensed drivers. There were 12 ward council responses, 5 licensed vehicle proprietor responses, 3 operators, licensed operators, and then 6 who fell within the other category. So a breakdown of the questions asked in the survey and responses can be seen at Appendix 2. I will go through each of these with you on the PowerPoint so that you can see the percentage and responses on that. That's page 87 for you so that you can easily find it. We also received a formal representation from one trade representative from the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Association. This was a singular person, and that can be found at Appendix 3 on page 119. We also received a response to the consultation from the GMB Union, and that can be found at Appendix 4, which is page 127. If anybody needs the pages again, I've got them written down because I went through and got them all first before we came in today. The GMB Union one is their proposed counter policy that they would like considering. There is also a copy of the full survey responses at page 141, so that gives you everything. What I'll do quickly first is I'm going to go through the PowerPoint, and basically it goes through each of the questions and then the percentage of respondents, whether they agreed or disagree with the proposed changes. So the first one is, so I've already gone through with the breakdown of the numbers of people that responded to the questionnaire. So question one, which was paragraph 2, I won't read through the proposed and the existing and the proposed unless you really want me to. But with regard to this proposed change, 66% said yes, they agreed with it, and 34% said no, they didn't. Question 3, 74% of those respondents said they agreed with the proposed changes, and 26% said they didn't. Question 4, 73% of the respondents said they agreed with the proposed changes and 27% didn't. Question, I've just done that one, haven't I? Question, no, it's gone over, bear with me. Question, oh, sorry. Question 5. 69% of the respondents agreed with the proposed change and 31% didn't. Question 6, 73% agreed with the proposed change, 27% didn't. With question 7, 69% agreed with the proposed change, 31% didn't. Question 8, 72% agreed with the proposed change, 28% didn't. Question 9, 72% agreed with the proposed change, 28% didn't. Question 10, 75% agreed with the proposed change, 26% didn't. Question 11, 75% agreed, 25% didn't. Question 12, 71% agreed, 29% didn't. Question 13, 72% agreed, 28% didn't. Question 14, 73 agreed with the proposed change and 27 didn't. And question 15, 69% agreed, 31% didn't. And question 16, 70% agreed, 30% didn't. Question 17, 68% agreed, 32% didn't. And question 18, regarding the minor motor vehicle-related offences, 63% agreed with the proposed change, 37% didn't. Question 19, 74% agreed with the proposed change and 26% didn't. And that is the results in a nutshell. I apologise I went through that really quickly, but I thought if I read through every paragraph, you may well hate me. So as you can see, for each one, the proposed changes received a higher percentage of those people who responded agreeing with the changes. As I've said to you, if you go to Appendix 2 on page 87, that's a breakdown of what I've just shown you basically. I have been through and summarised as well all the responses to the survey. One thing I'd quite like to highlight in it is just because somebody hasn't agreed with the proposed change, if you read the summary responses, some of them are actually saying it's not because they don't agree that we should have a policy or they don't agree with the policy. They've actually saying that they think the policy, they don't agree with it because they think the existing policy was actually sufficient and adequate as it was. So it isn't somebody saying, no, we don't agree with it, we don't want the policy. So the summaries break down that within the report. In addition to this, I've also, for members, I won't go through these either, I'm hoping you have read your pack. I've added in all of the West Yorkshire policies so that members can see how our policy relates in relation to those other policies. And obviously members are asked to consider the alternative policy that GMB have submitted, which can be found at Appendix 4, which is page 127. So the next steps and timelines for us, unless members would like me to go into a little bit more detail, which I'm happy to do. But the next steps and timelines are members are asked to make a decision in relation to the draft policy following the consideration of all the responses that we got to the consultation. If members resolve to adopt that the policy, it will then be effective immediately. If members are resolved to keep the policy as existing, again, this will be effective immediately and there'll be no change. But if members should consider that the proposed alternative policy provided by GMB, shown at Appendix 4, is a preferred option, then members will be required to resolve to instruct officers to carry out a full consultation regarding that policy. So it is recommended that members resolve to adopt the proposed draft policy. Looking at the responses to the survey, looking at the responses received to the consultation, the majority of the respondents agree with that. And therefore, the options members have today are to resolve to adopt the proposed draft fitness and suitability policy as shown at Appendix 1, to resolve to keep the existing fitness and suitability policy as is. So although I haven't put that in, members can see from Appendix 1 that if you remove the blue and you can see that the red bits where it's crossed out, that's what the existing policy says. Or option 3 is to resolve to instruct officers to carry out a full consultation in relation to the alternative policy produced by GMB as shown at Appendix 4. I appreciate I have sort of whirlwinded through that. I didn't want to go through it in a huge amount of detail unless members would like me to do so. So over to you, Chair.
Thank you. So questions and comments, Councillor Zaman?
Thank you. So there's a few points. Sorry. So there's a few points that I'd like to mention, just in relation to the overall policy rather than individual points. So I think as a whole, the policy as it's being drafted is quite weak. So elements where it covers serious things like dishonesty are quite vague and they're not clearly defined. So I think an issue will arise where, as I mentioned earlier, the current decision-making process is where essentially you or someone else within the council decides the fate and how the policy is to be applied. So given the fact that it's quite a vague policy and you will ultimately be making them decisions, it opens the door to a lot of subjectivity, which I think is not what we want in a policy, because it needs to be clearly defined, and drivers that are obviously going to be answerable to this policy need to know exactly what they can and can't do, which I feel like the policy as drafted fails to do. So in essence, what that, in my opinion, could create is that, say you make a decision, it'll open the floodgates for an appeal, which is, number one, it's something that no party really wants. It's going to have a massive cost implication on the council, given that unions will likely be supporting the drivers and will take it all the way. So I think it's an issue which we can foresee, so we can clearly avoid. One thing to back up what I'm saying is that the policy as drafted has a higher threshold than would be applied in a court of law. So if someone was to appeal, the threshold to which they would be answerable is lower than what is currently drafted in the policy. For example, the policy says that things like, so it's quite contradictory in the sense that it says that the impact that the decision will have on an individual's livelihood should not be considered, whereas if we're in court, that is always a mitigating factor. So why are we applying one decision now, and then when it goes to court, that may or may not be considered? And then also the policy is also quite contradictory in the sense that it says that we're not going to consider people's personal circumstances, which is at paragraph 7, whereas at paragraph 19 it says each case is considered on its own merits. So are we following paragraph 7 where it's like we're not considering what an individual's personal circumstances are, or are we following 19 where you know, going to be considering each case on its merits? So in my opinion, I feel like the whole process needs reviewing, starting with how a decision is made, and obviously that going into the suitability policy as well. So therefore, I feel like the GMB policy is much better drafted in the sense that it's quite thorough in its processes and how it outlines what should be done. So that's the one that I feel like should be adopted.
Thank you, Chair. In looking at the policy on page 75, on item 10, it says reference to convictions in this policy equals official cautions, reprimands, warnings. I get that. But it also says, in terms of fixed penalties, are we saying that somebody who gets a parking ticket, which is a fixed penalty, effectively, somewhere, they would have to report that in to licensing? Is that what we're saying? That if you get a parking ticket somewhere, why would that have weighting on somebody's ability, suitability to be a driver? I get there are other factors that come to this, and you know, there are certain behaviours that somebody exhibits, and you start to think, this is raising alarm bells. But a parking ticket, why would somebody that's taking their family, so one of the drivers here takes their family somewhere, they go down to Cornwall, and they overstay for 10 minutes, and they get a parking ticket. So these guys have to come back and let you know they got a parking ticket, and that goes as part of the waiting. I don't. Am I misunderstanding that? Or have I been a bit simple with this? Would somebody please explain? Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. A lot of it, you know, a lot of Councillor Zaman's comments were comments. So in reality, you're at the point now where, as members, it is your decision at this moment in time. So the comments that are being made, you can consider. There are certain things I think myself and Russ would quite like to clarify. I think I'll pass over to Russell.
Yeah, just to pick up on a few of the points that you raised, Councillor Zaman, we don't control the amount of appeals that get submitted. The policy itself, I think I'd just like a bit of clarification on which bits you think is vague. Is it the preamble or is it the table of offences? Because the GMB policy that's been proposed, the preamble to that pretty much reflects what the proposals are for ours. So if ours is vague, then theirs is vague. Also, on appeal, the courts are duty-bound and legally bound to have regard to our policy and will apply our policy as we do. They don't apply the DVLA standard, they don't look at family circumstances, they don't look at personal circumstances. The law says that they can't do that. We can't control how the magistrates think in the background. All we can do is present our case and the law as it stands. And that is that personal circumstances and financial circumstances are not a consideration when determining if somebody's fit and proper to hold a licence. Each case is considered on its own merits, but it's on the facts of that case, not on the personal circumstances or individual financial circumstances of that driver. And the GMB policy, while it does list a lot of offences individually, you have to look at that in detail, and would you want somebody that carrying the most vulnerable with a conviction that they're proposing would be acceptable?
Sorry, well, the first comment in regard to the bit that was referenced by Councillor Butt, that's not actually a proposed amendment, that's what's actually in the existing policy. So it's actually already in the policy, is that statement that if somebody gets a fixed penalty notice, it is considered. I think, generally speaking, I mean, if somebody gets it's about proportionality in a lot of ways. If somebody's got a parking ticket and they've paid the parking ticket, but then you've got the people that get the parking tickets and fail to pay the parking tickets, and then you know, if they fail to pay the parking tickets, they then commit an offence, don't they? And they could potentially be prosecuted for that offence. So, although it seems like a small thing in the first instance, so if I were to get a parking ticket or somebody and you pay it, that's fine. If you get a fixed penalty notice and you have not paid that fine, that's when you start looking at offences. So it would then go to court. I mean, ultimately, in reality, it's, you know, if a driver comes to us and is honest, oh, I've got this fixed penalty notice, or they're dropping a cigarette and you know, they could get a fixed penalty notice for that. You're dropping litter, you can get a fixed penalty notice for that. Some might say that's minor, some people, and you know, actually quite a lot of the Kirklees population, they really don't like littering, they don't like people dropping rubbish all over the place. So, you know, although it may not say that person's not fit to hold a licence because they've got that fixed penalty notice, but if you look at a person's behaviours and you are looking at complaints we've received and a whole host of things, it just gives you a picture of that person. If somebody's honest with us and says, we've got this, then, you know, it also puts them in better positioning because they've actually been honest throughout the process. Does that answer your question?
Sort of. I get that if somebody doesn't pay a parking ticket, you know, you've got to pay it. It's a given. And if they've paid it, then there shouldn't be an issue. But the fact that they just got one and then they have to come back and then report that, and that goes as part of waiting, just seems a bit too strict. And I get we have to be strict, given obviously something. But I just feel like it's like a whole, everything is sort of very, very strict around this. And I get about the pattern of behaviour, but if you don't pay parking tickets and continuously don't pay parking tickets, you're not suitable. But if you've paid it and it's sort of been done, it is a sort of civil offence. It just seems that it's a bit too strict. And I get that it forms part of the policy. It was just a comment that I noticed on there. But thank you.
Chair, if it's okay. I just want to comment that really this policy isn't around people getting parking tickets. It's about mainly to deal with people that have got serious offences, but then accumulation of minor offences. There's a bit of a differentiation, which I think members of the public are sometimes not necessarily aware of, about getting a parking ticket, say in a council car park, which would be a civil penalty charge, which isn't actually a fixed penalty notice. You haven't actually broken the law. It's a civil penalty charge between the person who operates the car park and the person that may have broken the rules of that car park. That isn't what this policy is about at all. It's about fixed penalty notices, which might be issued for parking infringements, but only mainly when issued by either the council or the police. And that's mainly in relation to sort of traffic-style parking offences, where there might have been an obstruction of the highway or something like that, that's actually where it's breaking the law or breaking the highway code. So we're not concerned about people not parking in the bay in a car park in a multi-storey, but fixed penalty notices where there's actually been a breaking of the law in relation to maybe highway offences. But if the committee is concerned that the part of the policy is unclear in that respect, we can resolve today to add a few words in to clarify the difference between, say, a parking ticket that might be a civil penalty charge and a fixed penalty notice that might be issued by the police, if that's any help.
Thank you. That does provide a little bit more clarity in terms of what I was trying to get at, and adding some more wording on there would help, because somebody like me that should be a bit more educated on what that means, a lay member of the public would just look at that and think, well, that's a bit harsh.
Agreed. I think we can resolve.
If it's due to be adopted, if we do agree to resolve and it's adopted today, should we agree the wording in this room, in this meeting?
Given that it's a minor change, if the committee would allow us as officers to add some words in there in the vein of which I've explained them to you, rather than trying to agree the exact wording now, and we can go through you, Chair, possibly about the wording which you can communicate to the committee afterwards. But if you give us the authority to amend the policy in the way to be more explanatory rather than to change the the material thing that we're trying to actually achieve through that particular part of the policy, I'd be comfortable to do that as long as committee is.
Councillor Butt, is that something that you'd advocate for? Obviously, it needs to go out and everybody needs to agree to that. But is that something that you're advocating for today?
Well, if that explains for people that will want to vote on this particular item, then if that helps, then yes.
Yeah, Chair, I believe taxi trade, both from Hackney Garage and private, they've been part of the consultation. I think they are here. Can we hear their view, what they think the proposed new policy?
I've got Mr Rashid down on my list.
Yeah, all right then, thank you.
So do you have any specific questions or comments yourself?
No.
Okay, is it Mr Rashid? Have I got that right? Who wants to ask a question? Have I got myself mixed up? It's Mr Mukhtar.
I just wanted licensing to confirm that you wouldn't be looking in drivers' personal circumstances when making a decision. Russell's just said, whereas before you were always telling us each case will be on its own merit, and you will be looking at drivers' situation and circumstances. So that's just got me a bit confused.
I think, just to clarify on that, when we're making decisions, if a driver tells us that they're going to lose their livelihood, they can't pay the mortgage, they've got children to feed, that's what I mean by personal circumstances. That's not something that we can take into account when coming to a decision. It's regrettable, but that's the way the law stands, that doesn't go towards somebody's fitness and suitability.
What we tend to look at is the circumstances surrounding what's happened. We look at the history of the driver. Has that driver been, you know, if they've been a driver for 20 years, have they ever done anything in that 20 years? Things like that. When it comes to them actually losing their livelihood, that's not relevant to the decision making.
Has that clarified it for you?
Yes.
Fantastic. The man, back to you.
Thanks, Chair. I think we're going off on a bit of a tangent, getting stuck on certain points. So I'd just like to make it clear that what we're actually voting on is whether we want to adopt the Council's proposed policy or the GMB's proposed policy. And as I touched on earlier, I feel like the GMB policy is much better written. It highlights and clarifies and goes into much more detail on specific issues. And Councillor Amin's just picked up on one example which I'd just like to highlight. So if you just bear with me a second. So if we look at point 13 on the Council Suitability Policy, Council Suitability Policy on page 75, paragraph 13, it says, in all cases, the Council will consider a conviction or behaviour and what weight should be attached to it, and each case will be decided on its own merits in line with this policy. Now, that in itself is quite confusing based on the conversation we'd had over whether we're going to consider certain circumstances and we're not going to consider certain circumstances. So that point in itself is quite confusing, whereas what the GMB policy states also in paragraph 13 is, in all cases, the Council will consider a conviction or relevant behaviour and what weight should be attached to it, and each case will be decided on its own merits and in line with the policy. The decision to grant, refuse or revoke a licence will be made by the licensing panel or subcommittee. So essentially what that's doing is it's making the decision making more democratic. So if we're going to kind of have people's livelihoods on the line when we're making these decisions, then you know, I think it should be more of a democratic process, which the GMB policy allows for.
Thank you, Chair. So just to come back, so the paragraph that you're referring to that you're not happy with, that's actually existing policy, and we weren't proposing to amend that anyway, so that's not part of what hasn't been part of the consultation. With regard to decision making and the GMB report on the decision making, that report isn't in front of members today. It will be brought back at a later date. Decision making as it stands sits with myself. If you were to be minded to look at the GMB policy, you wouldn't be adopting that policy today. You're asking us to go out and consult on that policy today. It is a decision for members, but you know, the recommendations are that you adopt the policy in accordance with the results that were received from the consultation.
Any more questions and comments before we go to the vote? Anything from the trade? Anything you'd like to add further? It's important to capture your voice. Unfortunately not. But you have had an opportunity to respond to the consultation. Lovely. Okay. So, in effect, Councillor Zaman?
Sorry, Chair. I'd just be interested, can we have the trade's comments on what they feel would be the most suitable policy, whether it's the proposed council suitable policy or whether you'd like to see it go to a consultation on the GMB policy?
Councillor Zaman, I did give them an opportunity to do that, so I asked the question. Okay, thank you. All right, so really there's four...
Chair, just to clarify, the GMB policy hasn't been out to consultation. The trade would have an opportunity to comment on that if that was members' decision.
I was going to make that comment as well. The members of the public, the 333 that responded, haven't had an opportunity to see that and respond to it. Hence the reason why I think the third option was about going out to full consultation on that. Okay, so the four resolutions then that have been put forward, the recommendations. One of the recommendations is to adopt the proposed draft fitness and suitability policy as shown in paragraph 1. So that's with the amendments. In addition to that, as indicated or proposed by Councillor Butt, that there are additional wording in respect of paragraph 10 to clarify particular situations, to make it clear for members of the public and the trade about what situations might be taken into account. The second one, or the third one, should be to keep the existing fitness and suitability policy. And the fourth one, if members are particularly drawn to the GMB proposal, that officers carry out a full consultation in respect of that and bring it back to us at the next meeting. Okay? So we'll do a show of hands. So first of all, to adopt the amended fitness and suitability policy as indicated in paragraph 1. Can we have a show of hands?
Can you keep the hands up?
Keep your hands up, please. Yep, lovely.
Yeah, thank you.
And then subsection to that, to adopt the draft fitness and suitability policy, but also to include a specific small amendment to paragraph 10 to add additional wording in there for clarity, as been discussed. So adopting paragraph appendix 1, but adding more wording to paragraph 10. I'm for that. For me, it's just to make the situation clearer. Okay. To keep the existing fitness and suitability policy as it is without the amendments? Anyone? Okay. So if you're interested in the suggestion put forward by GMB, to ask officers to carry out full consultation in relation to an alternative policy produced by the GMB Union, as indicated in Appendix 4. Can you have a show of hands? Okay. So it looks like, by majority, it's to adopt the policy, the amended policy, as in Appendix 1, but to include additional wording in paragraph 10 to clarify the situation. That's what's been agreed by majority here today. Okay, moving to the last agenda item, item 11, and that's to do with a culmination impact assessment. Fiona, over to you.
Apologies, Chair, I'm just trying to get rid of the massive amount of the last report. So you'll be pleased to know this is the final report today. It doesn't relate to taxes, this is to do with Licensing Act. And the purpose of the report is to inform members of proposals and to seek approval to consult on the need for a cumulative impact assessment within Huddersfield and Dewsbury town centres. So, under Section 5 of the Licensing Act, it requires that the licensing authority to prepare and publish a statement of licensing policy every 5 years. During the 5-year period, we must also keep that policy under review. And the licensing authority can make revisions to it as it considers appropriate. Our existing statement of licensing policy for Kirklees became effective on 15th of January 2020. So we are looking at possibly starting the review over the next 12 months to be ready to be approved by members in the next 2 years. In April 2018, the Police and Crime Act introduced a new provision within the Licensing Act, and it placed cumulative impact assessments on a statutory footing and provides that a licensing authority may, in appropriate circumstances, publish a cumulative impact assessment. Cumulative impact, basically, in its easiest form, means too many in a specific area of something. So there's loads in one area. Is that an issue? So it's the potential impact on the promotion of the licensing objectives. So if we have X number of licensed premises within a specific area, is that going to have a negative effect on those licensing objectives? So the evidence to support the authority's opinion must be consulted upon before it's published, and it must be reviewed at least every 3 years once it's published, with any review having to be considered upon any revisions published along with the evidence. So basically, if we, as an authority, if today members agree for us to go out to consult on a proposed cumulative impact assessment, and it comes back and we adopt this, any applicant who may wish to obtain a licence to vary premises within that area will be expected to demonstrate through their operating schedule, so that's part of their application, and it's the part of the application where they say how they're going to meet the 5 licensing objectives, the steps that they intend to take so that the council and responsible authorities can be satisfied that the granting of a new or varied licence will not add to the cumulative impact already been experienced within an area. So the evidence to support the cumulative impact assessment, we've worked with colleagues in public health and the police, and there is data that is shown at Appendix I, and that is page 296, 297 and 298 of the policy, of the report, sorry. And in that we believe that it does show that there is evidence that we should be going out to consult on a cumulative impact assessment. I just want to note that there are areas in red within the data that it doesn't give a specific number. Now, there is a reason for this, and I can explain the reason for this. Because the numbers are so low, due to GDPR, it could result in somebody being able to identify a person. So Public Health and the police have told us we are not allowed to use the data, which is why it's blank. Having considered all the police data that we have got, there is a view that we may have sufficient evidence for the authority to consider publishing the cumulative impact assessment for both Huddersfield and Dewsbury town centres. You can see from the appendices the maps showing the areas which we will be looking at. In relation to it, when we are doing the assessment, it may well be that we are specifically looking at specific types of licences, such as off licences. So does the data show that the sale of alcohol within an area from off licences is causing antisocial behaviour or crime and disorder within a specific area? Is that what's contributing to it? And if so, do we have enough in that area? And if we get a new application, have we got too many? So in short, that is what a cumulative impact assessment is. And today what we are asking members, so for the next steps and timelines, we would like officers will draw up a relevant consultation document with a view to commencing a 12-week consultation. Hopefully, it does say the end of July. Because we postponed the previous committee, it might push it on a little bit. And then following consultation, a further report will be brought to committee for members to make a decision, and that will help you to take into account the evidence available and the results of the consultation. And then members can make the decision as to whether the cumulative impact assessment should be published or not. If the answer to the question is yes, we then have to do another report that would go to full council with a recommendation that the council's statement of licensing policy be amended so to include the publication of the assessment. So members are recommended today to consider the information in the report and whether they believe that there is sufficient evidence to consult on proposals to introduce a cumulative impact assessment for both Huddersfield and Dewsbury town centres. And if members do agree that there's sufficient evidence to consult, members are recommended to authorise officers to commence a formal consultation for 3 months or 12 weeks. I always end up saying 3 months, but in reality 12 weeks is the usual time frame, with results of the consultation being presented at a future Licensing Safety Committee meeting. It's over to you, Chair.
Questions and comments on this report? Councillor Marchington?
Yeah.
Thanks, Fiona. I mean, there was significant work done by the authority a long time ago about the impact of alcohol in both Dewsbury Town Centre and Huddersfield Town Centre on antisocial behaviour. And I think at that stage we implemented what we called street drinking control zones in a limited number of areas. And there is a link. I know there's concerns at the moment about, we know there's a link between alcohol and actually being a victim of violent, antisocial behaviour and violent crime, as well as being, a much smaller link between being a perpetrator, most things. So I think it is a really good thing to do, to look at that, and it will just be an extra tool for us as the licensing authority to work with partners to ensure that everybody, when they come into either Dewsbury Town Centre or Huddersfield Town Centre, can enjoy themselves, to feel safe about doing that. And there's nothing from a licensing point of view that's adding to a particular problem. So, and again, it's a consultation. There's opportunities for people to feed into that. And if it does provide further evidence of, I think sufficient evidence to do the consultation, if there's other things come forward, then it would just be an extra tool for us to make sure that people are safe and can enjoy themselves. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else think it's a good idea to do this assessment? Anybody think it's a bad idea? Any questions? Councillor Gregg, I didn't see you there.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, senior police officers have said it's a good idea, as well as obviously the figures in the report which suggest that there are issues. My take on it is that Huddersfield has probably lost a number of licensed venues over recent years since the pandemic. It'd be interesting to know how many are currently serving alcohol, whether they're serving it to people in a bar or from like an off licence, for example, compared to 15 years ago. And that would be interesting because, and it'll be interesting to see the comparative figures of crime and disorder as well. And I think from looking at this, it does tend to suggest that this is well worth doing. So from my point of view, I think would have my support. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, I'm not sure how far back our records or the police records go with regard to the crime and disorder stuff. So we'd have to liaise with them. But I think maybe if we even go just as far as just pre-pandemic, maybe, you know, we could possibly have a look at what the figures were then. It's something, I suppose, once we've done the consultation, when we come back with the report, it's something we can add in, or add in as much as we can of the data that we have.
Okay, then I think we're going to the vote, aren't we? All right. So, first of all, it's been recommended that we note the report and the appendix. That's it, in there, Appendix 1. And do we think there is sufficient evidence to consult on proposals to introduce a culmination impact assessment for both Huddersfield and Dewsbury? Have a show of hands. Do we think it's sufficient evidence? Okay. And if there is sufficient evidence, do we agree that officers should commence a formal consultation and bring it back to this committee at some point in the near future? Okay. So I think that's by majority. Right, I think we've come to the end of the meeting. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.